welcome to RVN Television show. Welcome to RVN Television and What the Why with Barbara Ann. If you haven't seen us before, our show features conversations with diverse leaders from all walks of life about why they do what they do and how they figured things out. Maybe you are sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, or maybe you feel stuck and you want to get unstuck in your business, your life, or your job. All of our guests have something in common with you. At some point in their lives, they felt similarly. And today's no exception. Please join me in welcoming today's guest, retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Peggy Ann Phillips. Peggy has fond memories of the years she and her siblings, Donna, Patricia, Danny, and Billy, spent as Air Force brats. Her dad was a security policeman, and his duty called them worldwide. In 1972, as timing would have it, Peggy and her friends became seniors at Kaiserslautern American High School in Germany, precisely the same time that Command Master Sergeant Dougherty became chief of, that was the other one I was trying to remember, chief of police at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. But Peggy had her own journey to pursue. She bid goodbye to her family overseas and returned to the States to attend Glassboro State College, which is now Rowan University, in New Jersey, pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Elementary Education. Miss Dougherty had been teaching first grade at Browns Mills Elementary School in Browns Mills, New Jersey, for nearly 3 years, when a friend encouraged her to apply for pilot training with the Air Force Reserves. Around the world, again. Second Lieutenant Phillips completed officer training school in April of 1980, followed by undergraduate pilot training at Williams Air Force Base in Arizona. She's the 75th female pilot who graduated since the UPT reopened to women after World War II. She flew C-140s with the Air Force Reserves for the first 19 years of her career, first at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey and then McChord Air Force Base in Washington State. She's it just went up. She has over 5,000 flying hours in the C-141, including operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and Desert Calm. And she landed the C-140 on every continent in the world. In March of 2000, Lieutenant Colonel Phillips became the commander of the 446th Operations Support Flight at McChord and returned to pilot training during the unit's conversion to C-17s. She likens the conversation to driving a Mack truck one day and driving a Corvette the next. Lieutenant Colonel Phillips then assumed command of the 97th Airlift Squadron at McChord in 2002 and oversaw their activation, answering the nation's call to support Operation Iraqi Freedom from 2003 to 2005. She also flew C-17 combat missions in support of Operations Enduring Freedom and Noble Eagle. In 2005, Colonel Phillips was assigned as the Director of Operations of the 618th Tanker Airlift Control Center at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. The 618 TACC, or Tanker Airlift Control Center, controls the world's largest transportation system, and as a senior controller, Colonel Phillips was charged with keeping heavy airlift, refueling, and medical missions moving all over the world. In December of 2007, Colonel Phillips was assigned as the individual mobilization augmentee to the Director of Current Operations, overseeing the planning of airlift and tanker operations. These missions support Homeland Defense, Special Assignment Airlift missions, sensitive missions, and support of the President of the United States and other senior members of the government. The Directorate is also responsible for information for the Air Operations Center. Since the spring of 2008, Colonel Phillips also served as the Director of Mobility Forces, the 1st Air Force's, or 1AF, in support of Air Force's North missions. She has directed airlifts in support of rescue and relief missions for Hurricanes Gustav, Hannah, and Ike, and most recently the earthquake in Haiti before her retirement. Peggy retired from service in May 2010, and as we joked, She's probably as busy in retirement as she was when serving our country. Of course, she's still serving our country, just a little differently. She's a member and has served as vice president and scholarship chairperson for the Washington State chapter of Women in Aviation, and where she regularly coordinates and participates in outreach events. She's a charter and life member and past treasurer and current scholarship chairperson for Women in Military Aviators, and she's also very active in her church, the East Shore Unitarian Church, where she's served in roles ranging from board of trustees and president and other positions, including the current co-chairperson for the Congregation for the Homeless. Lucky for me, I also get to call this amazing woman family. So please join me in welcoming retired Colonel Peggy Phillips to our show via Zoom from Washington State. So, yay!
Thank you, Barbara Ann. That was very nice.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And as you know, and as our viewers know, and there was a little hint in there in your bio, after we read all of the amazing things, and you've done amazing things, and so thank you so much for the service that you and other members of the family have also given to our country. But when you were running around on Air Force bases all over the world with your dad, I don't know that what you ended up doing with your career is what you really thought you were going to do when you were a little girl. So, and there is a hint in there too, but if you could share with us, what did you want to be when little Peggy Doherty was growing up?
Well, you know, the important thing to remember is it was the 1960s and the 1970s. And so the opportunities that we have in the world today as women certainly weren't available back then. And my folks, neither were college educated. My dad was enlisted. And so I had great mentors in them, knowing that education was the key to a future. But at the same time, there were still specific roles that women could do. In the 60s, I remember thinking, oh, it would be so cool to be an astronaut. You know, we were all glued to the TV watching trips to the moon. But at the time, you may recall that all astronauts had to be fighter pilots. Well, the only way to be a fighter pilot was to be in the military, and the only way you could do that was to be a man. There was a program called the Mercury 13, where there was a group of women who trained to be astronauts. But unfortunately, even though they were simultaneously training, Vice President Johnson at the time disbanded that program because he just didn't think that that was a good opportunity for women. So I know, just for that very reason, that was the only thing. And so given all those kinds of my restraints or exposure, I decided that, well, I couldn't really be a scientist and have a family, and I might want to have a family. So I went ahead and put my sights to go to college to be a school teacher. I loved working with children, and I figured that that would be a great way to help children in the world. So when I graduated in 1972 from high school, that's what I did. I went to college in 1976 to become a school teacher with the goal and aspirations to teach children. So that was what I wanted to be and how I wanted to be, how I got there, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I truly was unaware that there were women already, young women in the world going to school to become scientists and making their mark. I just, I didn't have that mentorship at the time.
Sure. And but then something changed. And a friend as we said, a friend convinced you, you know what? The times they be a changing. And so tell me.
An exciting thing happened. Yes. So the military began to think that perhaps they could begin to allow women once again to
imagine that
the military. Oh, I know. Who knew?
Who knew?
In fact, this year is 50 years for the Navy that they started to train women in flight operations. The Air Force was just a few years behind, and basically in 1976, there was an announcement that the Air Force was going to allow women to fly airplanes.
Wow.
Well, that was good news, but it caused an incredible uproar with a bunch of World War II veterans who were the Women Air Force Service Pilots, WASPs, that flew during World War II. And well, when they served, they were told they were going to get veterans benefits and they were going to be treated as veterans. In fact, that was not the case. At the end of World War II, they were dismissed. Thank you very much for your service. We appreciate what you've done. And it honestly was not until the late 1970s that they finally were given veteran status. But these fine women, and you can only imagine what these women must have been like who went on to fly airplanes, every airplane in the inventory during World War II. When they heard that now the Air Force was going to allow women to fly, they're like, wait, we did that. Mm-hmm. And so their story became more well known, and they mentored us as new flyers. It was so incredible. We had this great mutual admiration society. We admired everything that they had done, and we stood on their shoulders, and they marveled at the new opportunities that we were given. So even though I thought I was going to go out and save the world by teaching children, I learned that this program existed, and a friend of mine encouraged me to apply. And I joined the reserves, which meant I had to be sponsored by a reserve unit, which at the time I was still in New Jersey, so that's why I did that. Mm-hmm. And got selected to go to pilot training. And I knew that I was going back to heavy airlift. So another caveat in all of this is back during that time, women were restricted to non-combat roles in the military. Just like the WASP flew every airplane in the inventory, but they could not leave the United States border. So in the 70s, when they started to allow women to fly in the military, well, you can fly certain airplanes, but you can't fly in combat. So this year, we're celebrating 30 years since that combat exclusion law was repealed. Awesome. But there's a few other little stories that go along with that as well, because when you fly cargo, sometimes you still have to get to where the stuff needs to go, you know, even though, well, technically you're not supposed to be there, but well. Yeah. Anyway, so that's how that happened in the 70s and the 80s.
Wow. So that's a perfect place for us to pick up after our brief commercial break. So please come back for more of our conversation with Colonel Peggy Ann Phillips about how things did change and how she definitely played a role, as you heard in her bio, in some major operations on behalf of our country. Welcome back to What the Why with Barbara Ann and today's very special guest, Colonel Peggy Ann Phillips, retired colonel from the U.S. Air Force. And right before the break, we were talking about how she went from not being able to enlist as a pilot to being able to enlist and serve as a pilot, but not being able to go into combat, to then finding herself in situations that were combat, because if you're flying stuff, you're probably flying into combat, and other evolutions that have happened throughout the Air Force. So to the extent that you can talk about it, I named a bunch of different missions. What was the first one that you went into where you found it really was more of a combat-like scenario?
So believe it or not, it was in the late 80s when there was the Grenada invasion. And so that was actually the first time that there had been a large-scale invasion or action on foreign soil since Vietnam. And so there was a period of time when flying into that area, I wasn't there during the wave when we were delivering soldiers, but there was also a time when we would go in and get the equipment that the Russians had left behind and bring them back to the United States. So interesting part of that story, I was flying C-141s, which had a crew of 3 pilots, 2 flight engineers, and 2 loadmasters. So there's 7 of us. And at the end of this time period, anybody who had participated in various ways during Grenada were given, awarded an achievement medal for having participated. Shortly after I received my medal, I got a mail that it had been rescinded.
Oh.
And I was like, well, why is that? So we learned that it was rescinded because women weren't allowed in combat roles.
Oh, no,
But
no.
everybody else on the crew continued to get their medal.
That's
So,
insanity. That is absolute insanity. Okay. Please do
again,
continue.
1980s, so,
I
take it
know,
for,
but and you don't think about 1980s. Well, for some of us, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it really isn't that
right.
long ago. But
No, it
wow,
isn't.
that this was
But I had an amazing wing commander. And again, throughout our life, we end up with incredible mentors and incredible people who are in our court. And he said, okay, this absolutely can't stand. And so then I was able to get my award reinstated. So then the next big thing that happened was in 1990, 1991, when Iraq invaded Kuwait. And you may remember that I was activated in the early of September, deactivated in June. Well, the war was only 6 days long in January,
right.
but all the stuff had to get there. And again, all the stuff had to come back. And it was very interesting because over a course of time, again, there was combat time where you were going in the bunkers when you were getting scuds lobbied at you. But after that war in 1993, there was a huge lobby. Again, our mentors from the WASP and from women military aviators, there were congressmen, congresswomen that went and fought for this. And it was interesting how soon people had forgotten because there were women behind enemy lines already during that time. And so finally, Congress was able to repeal the combat exclusion law. And then women were, lots of career fields were open, as well as all the airplanes were open to women at that time.
Wow. And so you would go on to fly numerous missions in different operations and move up the ranks of leadership. Did you, and I guess the question I'm looking for is, did you experience any active combat situations that you found yourself in terms of having to fly in? Because one of the things you did was refueling and delivery of soldiers. And how does one find the courage, if that was the case, to fly in when so many other people would run the opposite direction?
Well, the interesting thing is, you train to do your job. You train to work as a crew member, to fly the airplane, and that's what you do. And yes, you're cognizant that, okay, this one might be a little bit more unusual than some, but by the same token, you're all working together, you're planning, your job is, you're focusing on flying the airplane and flying it safely to deliver the cargo or the crew, And then on the other side of it, the airplane that we flew, both of them, the C-141 and the C-17, had the capability of becoming an medical evacuation. So basically a mini hospital in the back of the airplane.
Okay.
So oftentimes you might have patients, soldiers coming back and taking them. So you're so focused on the mission that, even though you're aware and maybe your senses are heightened a little bit more, but you're still just focused on flying the airplane and doing the job safely.
And so after multiple missions and reaching the rank of colonel, you retire in 2010. And for some, that means you've worked hard. It's your time to relax. But no. You go on to mentor, to give what you received in terms of mentorship, in terms of, especially as it relates to women. So can you talk to us about your involvement with the Washington State chapter of Women in Aviation and also the Women Military Aviators organization that you're involved with?
I'm pretty passionate about both of those. And I think the reason that I am is because it opens up the world to women, young and older alike. There was an amazing woman named Peggy who actually single-handedly formed and started Women in Aviation International. And it started as a small group just trying to talk to women who were in the career field. Well, this past March, I went to the conference, the annual conference, and there were 4,500 women and some men, because we don't discriminate
Right.
there, but mostly, and from all over the world.
Wow.
And it's so exciting to see what some of these young women can do under the most austere conditions. But then also, one of the roles that I do is to go to schools here in the area. I'm also a docent at the Museum of Flight. And it's still so surprising to me that little girls will come up and they, oh, well, I can't do that because I'm a girl. And it's like, where have we been? You
Yeah.
know, and so you're still trying to encourage young women that, you know, school education is such, oh, it's so important. And being able to get scholarships, there's millions of dollars available for scholarships and teaching, getting involved in STEM and those dreams that they have as little girls, you know, there are ways to get there. I don't have all the technical expertise to be an engineer or any of those things, but I know some of the paths that you can take in order to get there.
Yeah.
So that's where my volunteer work has really come in handy. And the same with women military aviators, because sometimes when you're a minority in a big organization, having someone that you can talk to who's been down that path or experienced that, or how best can we make it better for others, that's what both of those organizations focus on.
Which is fantastic, because it is really heartening and wonderful that you are doing this kind of outreach, because the challenge that even today, all these years later, that there are still young girls that don't know that this is an opportunity for them. Mm-hmm. And I admit, if I could have a superpower, mine would be flying. So I love the fact that you get to do it. Believe it or not, we are at time. And there may be people who are watching who want to know more about the work that you're doing with women in aviation and women in military aviators. How can they find more information out about these organizations?
So Women in Aviation International has a website, it's wai.org, or also Women Military Aviators has a public Facebook page that you can go to as well. And then if they have questions that they need to coordinate through you, I'm happy to provide any information that I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this, to share your story. You truly were one of the original pioneers, and it really brings joy to know that you are creating the next generation of pioneers, of women who are serving our country.
Thank you so much, Barbara Ann. I really am grateful that you had me on today, and it was just delightful.
Awesome. So for all of you who are watching, we have some other exciting guests coming up. Admittedly, Colonel Phillips is a little tough to follow, but we do have some really exciting guests coming up, including Chaim Ohayon, who is a published author and founder of In Motion Coach, Shalita Hale, who's vice president and small business lender with Imito, and Jose Gonzalez, who's a wealth mindset coach and host of the Wealth Mindset podcast. Please believe me when I say you don't want to miss what any of our future guests have to say about their journeys. And if you missed what any of our past guests had to say and you want to check out their episodes on demand, you can watch all of season 1 as well as season 2 to date on the What the Why page of RVN Television's website, as well as on Roku. You have so many viewing choices these days, so many choices. Thank you very much for watching our show in the station, and please tell a friend or colleague about us. As a reminder, What the Why airs on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time and Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and I should say Eastern Daylight Time, and is available on demand through RVN Television and Roku. And please remember, whether you're looking to make changes in your life, no matter how big or small, please join us again for more informative, inspiring, and informational conversations with guests such as Colonel Phillips, who really thought about what it is they wanted to do with their lives, made whatever changes, and overcame whatever challenges or obstacles, whether real or perceived, were in their paths, to find their purpose and live it.